Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Finance and Sustainability Committee. Councilmember Mumm is absent, and Councilmember Burke, who's Vice Chair, is going to lead the meeting. I'll turn it over to you, Councilmember.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our finance meeting on October 19th. I would entertain a motion to approve the September 21st minutes.
So moved. Second.
Awesome. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the council minutes from September 21st have been passed. We did get a request for removing A off to move it to a discussion item. Are there any other consent items that any council members would like to go over? Okay, well, with that, why don't we start with Mike Piccolo then? And I see we also have Mark here as well for the downtown bid assessment process.
All right, I think I'm unmuted now. So the original item was for discussion of the 2021 downtown bid assessment process, which includes the annual assessment roll procedure, and Chris Green is on if there's any questions about that. And that's the annual process we go through every year to pass the resolution, set the hearing, which is for December 7th. And at that time, the council will have the annual assessment roll ordinance to approve where you set the assessment. There has been a request from a number of council members to add another process involving the downtown bid, which is to expand the boundary on the south side between Cedar and Lincoln from the current boundary going south up to the freeway, and then also to adjust or to establish an assessment rate for that area. So that involves two procedures, adopting two resolutions of intent to modify the boundary and then to establish the assessment rate, similar to what we did in 2018 on the north side for the Wonder Building. It's almost the exact same process. So on tonight's agenda are the two resolutions to declare your intent and to set the hearing for November 9th. And then on the 9th, you'll have an ordinance that does two simple things. One is to modify the boundary, to add a new zone, it's been called Zone 5 for this expanded area, and then to establish the assessment rate for that area, which is going to be a little bit different than the rest of the bid, and maybe Mark can get into that a bit. It'll be based on property value assessment, which is a much easier way to do the assessment versus square footage and the other details involved with that.
Awesome. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Council President.
Councilmember Cathcart.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Councilmember Cathcart.
Yep.
Had his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, and this might, maybe this is for Mark actually, but what I'm wondering is if it's possible to get a list of those folks who would be added as ratepayers in this expanded boundary, so council members could perhaps reach out to those individuals.
Yeah, Councilmember Burke, is it okay if I respond?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just real briefly, so we definitely have an Excel spreadsheet. I can forward that to you. A couple of the council members and Mike Piccolo have that in their possession, but I'll forward to you that as well as the proposed boundary.
Thank you. Council President.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that several business owners south of the railroad viaducts have been asking me, why can't we get the bid expanded? Because as more and more businesses move out of the downtown core because of pricing, or maybe not move out, I shouldn't say move out, as more and more businesses establish themselves south of the viaduct because of rising rents and things like that, they're wanting the same level of service that the bid provides north of the viaduct to the river and onto the North Bank. And so this is one way to do it. They obviously would pay some dues, but it's a lot cheaper than them having to hire their own security and their own maintenance people to clean sidewalks and things like that. And so I've been talking to the bid management through the DSP for well over a year about this. Was kind of hoping they would do it last year. So anyway, that's the genesis of it, is that people who own businesses south of the viaduct, as a practical matter, don't understand why they don't have the same service north of the viaduct. And the reason is the boundary ends at the viaduct. So this, we can do, under law, it can expand up to 10% per year without having a vote of the business owners, or the business owners can all, I shouldn't say business owners, it's the property owners mostly. There could be a vote for the entire district south of the viaduct to do it as well. But this is what the legislature gave us as far as an incremental approach.
Thank you. Councilmember Cathcart.
Just a follow up on the council president's comment. So I'm just wondering if we're having a number of these business owners and I guess would be ratepayers on the other side of the viaduct asking for this, is there a thought of going and having a vote so that they can officially weigh in and say officially that is?
Yeah, I don't have any objection to it. I know the bid had
What they're looking.
Yeah, the bid, it's a lot of work to go canvass the entire district, and they attempted it a few years ago, and there was, Mark can talk more, but I think there was one particular owner of lots of properties who was able to kind of torpedo that based on how many properties he had. But Mark can talk about that. So.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. And Mike Piccolo can keep me out of the legal weeds because I tend to mess this up real quickly. But as I understand it, and just have more recently come to understand, is the other option is to essentially disband and have all of the ratepayers, if you will, of the proposed and the existing bid vote as to whether they want to reform a business improvement district with this larger boundary. Apparently, we did that back in the 2000s at some point for some purpose. The other option is, as described by Council President, the 10% councilmanic, essentially. This, as is mentioned, when I came into this position, we were in the midst of working with this same area and kind of the southwest part of the downtown area. And did have Mr. Overhauser, if you aren't familiar with him, who owns a couple of properties in the south area that are sizable, posed, I think, a challenge such between him and one other key property owners that we weren't ultimately able to get to a point where we felt confident in recommending to something to council. This has intermittently been on our agenda. It was on our agenda to complete in 2020, and then COVID hit. And so I might just interject as one of our biggest concerns. Frankly, we share the concerns of those businesses. We have had some that have requested us to come in that area throughout the entire south boundary. However, that was pre-COVID, and one of the things we do know is that some of those same property and business owners are struggling to even pay rent and pay their mortgage. And so I was talking with one business up in this particular area about 2 weeks ago, and she's down 80% on her sales as a business compared to last year. So timing and that communication and engagement is critical to us. I think it would be, we want to do everything we can to accommodate and support you. And we know this area needs some additional help. We want to provide it. Deeply concerned about how we go about that communication and the timing. And that's why you see in our briefing that as much as we don't like to propose it, I think when you look at the valuation, the amount of revenue this would generate, about $130,000, we think just if you looked at 5 employees serving that area, and that's just clean and safe, with benefits for 3 of them, and annual expenses. So all the things that go, everything from paint to immunizations to training to you name it, year one, we'd be looking at $245,000. We could trim that down to 210-ish, still obviously higher than what would be generated at the rate we're proposing. That would still be affordable. And so, again, one of the things we don't like is suggesting, but in order to make this happen, would the city be willing to augment that, much like you did when we started, much like you do today? As much as we don't like to ask that, I think just a lot of mutual concern I'm sure you share with regards to coming in and proposing a new tax essentially on a property owner in such a difficult time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Council President?
Yep. I just had a question for you, Mark. I know at least some of I'm just wondering why you chose the west end of the zone as opposed to the east end.
Yeah, great question. Really comes down to timing. I think the east end, if you looked at kind of, let's just say roughly between Washington and Division, we think we might be able to address that area and stay within that 10% maximum revenue. Twofold. One, maybe a couple. One is there are a high concentration of nonprofits in that area that don't pay an assessment. So we believe the revenue would probably be a little bit less. We'd have to spread the boundary a little bit larger and it would be difficult, frankly, with the level of challenges in that area to deliver them some notable benefits, given just the additional challenges in that east area. Second is because we had been in discussions, even though it was 7 years ago, 7 years ago, with that southwest part. We felt like that might be the easiest in a short time frame. It's in pretty good condition. We've got some new businesses invested in that area. Not as many challenges, not as many charitable 501c3s that wouldn't contribute financially. Those are the reasons, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions, so thank you, Mark. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Just one more quick comment. If the council adopts the two resolutions, that boundary and those assessments are set, and that's what we go forward with, because we have to give notice to the property owners and meet certain other requirements, including publication. So we cannot, a week, 10 days down the road, decide we want to modify the boundary or change the assessment, because then we have to go and do the publication and the notice again, and that runs right up to the annual assessment adoption of December 7th. So, All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So just one last thing. Mike gives us a pretty tight turnaround there, and one of those being the communication out to those property owners should you approve this tonight. The last thing I would humbly request is that we work with the council and put together some sort of joint messaging so that we, because again, I don't think you want to go in an area where folks don't want a service that you're proposing. We don't want to be there if they don't want us. I think we've got the best chance if we are working together in that initial communication and outreach. That's what we would ask for. And then of course we haven't taken this to the bid board yet because of just the timing and the challenges around me getting together the data and the compilation of the assessments and all of that good stuff. So I would respectfully ask that you also allow the bid advisory board to weigh in, because one of the key things here is if you look at the summary I provided you, is that at least for the foreseeable future, we would have to essentially rely on the existing bid ratepayers to carry the back office and the admin expenses, just in order for us to present a rate here that's actually affordable to these businesses and property owners in the South District. We would like to give them an opportunity to weigh in on that. We think that's pretty important. So again, thank the council for this process, for how much you care for downtown. We would like very much to work with you.
Thank you. And Mark, if you can work with Lisa, our new communications director, I'm sure we can come up with some language around that. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm seeing nothing else, so we're gonna go ahead and move on just to keep our meeting going. It looks like the first three discussion items are Michelle, and I saw her on here earlier. So Michelle, if you want to start with the SBO Engineering Construction Management relocation first.
Okay. Thank you, council members. The SBO for engineering relocation and the solution for the SIP loan, we are going to actually have to pull that today, and they have informed us that they need 1.5 million. So they have increased costs because they increased square footage of the reconstruction, and I believe they have an elevator now. So we're asking to pull this item, both the SBO and the resolution, to update documents and move forth with a 1.5 million.
Okay, thank you. It looks like you still have the SIP loan then.
Yes. So the public safety SIP loan, what that is that the draw normally would have taken place in May-ish of this year. However, we went through the whole refinancing of all the public safety loans, and so we kind of put it on hold, hoping that we wouldn't have to draw the funds, but there is a need for the cash and to purchase the capital that are in the capital plan for 2020. And so we are requesting a resolution to go ahead and draw those funds and draw bond documents and start us on a payment schedule.
Okay, Councilmember Kinnear.
Thank you. As I recall, when we had this discussion about refinancing SIP, that we agreed that we did not want to continue funding public safety with SIP loans. So if I'm mistaken, if somebody else remembers differently, I'd love to hear it. This was pretty much a starter for some of us, so we don't want to get ourselves in that same trap where we are continuing to use SIP loans to fund public safety when there are other ways we can do that. So I'd love to hear, Council President, if I know we had a discussion about this, if I'm hallucinating, please tell me.
No, I think we had a proposal from the administration on how to go forward, and they were going to stop allocating the 1% of property tax increases that were allowed that we've been dedicating to public safety vehicles. And we said, nope, we're going to keep doing that. We're not going to refinance the SIP loans for 15 years. We're going to pay them when they're due. And we're not going to do any more SIP loans, which has been the plan for the last 8 years, that we were going to stop doing SIP loans. So we might have to, I'm not sure what the need is on the budget. We haven't figured out the budget yet. So I think probably we need to figure out the budget for 2021. And then if we need to look at something, either from reserves or a loan, we could do it. But I don't think we're in a position to decide it at this point.
Go ahead, Mr. Donovan.
Council President and council members, we did, when we talked about this during the SIP refinance, and I presented to you the alternate model that you went with, it did include loans in 2020. It was 2021 when it would no longer happen. But for 2020, they needed to do one more set of loans that they're proposing right now. And then starting next year, as the council indicated, they would start adding additional 1% into the amount that's available. That's when they could back off the loans. But this one was actually expected.
That's helpful. Thank you. Councilmember Cathcart.
Yeah, can somebody just maybe describe exactly what this is going towards? I know it's public safety equipment, but do we have a specific list of items that this would be purchasing?
We can provide that to you. It was part of the capital plan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments on this? Questions? Okay, thank you for that, Michelle. We'll move on. Next on our agenda is the proposed interlocal combined communications building operation, and that is Mr. Ormsby. So take it away. You are on mute, though.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. Should get the hang of this. So this item was on an earlier agenda for public safety.
and it was indicated a couple of council members had concerns that they wanted to discuss further. And so I'm here certainly today to talk about those items. In a nutshell, this is the agreement for the Combined Communications building out on the fire campus. And we now have the same users, but different entities. So both Shrek and police and fire dispatch both are in the building and take up about 98% of the space. And then city IT and county IT are the other 1%. The parties agreed to do a pro rata division of the payment of M&O expenses. We had talked about this earlier in the year. And Shrek and the county's combined share of the payment of the M&O expenses is about 82%. This agreement is basically retroactive back to the beginning of July of this year when Shrek became operational. And everyone has always agreed that they would pay their pro rata share of the M&O expenses. We have not billed them yet because we haven't adopted the agreement. Both Shrek and the county were involved in reviewing the agreement. I think there were a couple of issues raised during the review process, and I would concede that there are some things that could be included in the language describing the funds and the uses of funds and how those are true up at the end of the year that I think I can make some tweaks on, and that may, at least in part, respond to issues that were raised. I think the second thing, process-wise, that we learned out of this is, and this is on me, we definitely involved the fire department operations people who have basically run and managed this building ever since it was constructed back in the early 2000s. But because it involves accounting and payment, I think we can improve our processes internally if we also forward these to finance and have a CFO or someone in finance review as well, because there were some good accounting issues that were raised that we could certainly clarify better. And so I think there are some tweaks that we can make to this that would improve it. But before we did any of that, I wanted to bring it back to the council. It's similar to the form of an agreement that we shared with the council back in, I believe, February or March. But because there were concerns expressed after that, I wanted to come back with it again to give you the opportunity, if there were other issues or concerns, to raise those so that when we go through the redrafting, and I'll represent it's not going to be significant, but when we go through the redrafting, I wouldn't mind including and considering other comments and input that the council has.
Thank you, Mr. Marczewski. Any comments or questions from council?
Yeah, Council President here, trying to channel Councilmember Mumm, who's not able to be here. Mike, the one issue that we haven't discussed so much recently is what control or influence the tenants have over repairs we make in the building. If I understand correctly, under this agreement, the Shrek and the county are not paying any capital costs for the building. And so I don't love that, but that's not a deal breaker for me. But it sounded like they might have some control over what expenses are incurred in the building. And I'm just wondering since they're not paying capital expenses, whether or not we have to give them that kind of control over expenses since we're the ones solely responsible for keeping the building going.
Well, Council President, I think that's not entirely true. Okay. Any capital improvement that costs more than $50,000 needs to be unanimously approved by the site council, which includes representatives of the police department, fire department, Shrek, and city and county IT. Other minor capital expenses could be included, and actually in the past have been, and Brian Schaefer can probably speak to this better than I. The site councils presented a budget at the beginning of each year, and that budget often includes minor capital expenditures, which are capital expenditures under $50,000. If site council approves that budget, they then, based on the pro rata share of their use of the building, would pay that percentage of those minor capital expenditures. The agreement contemplates that expenses over $50,000 need to be approved by everybody, and that's how that facility has been operating up to this point. I guess the difference is the facility is now 20-some years old. I'm not aware of major capital expenditures on the horizon, but I think it's contemplated that that all parties would be involved. The difference now is this is a 2-year agreement, of which we're now 15 months into. So if there's going to be major capital expenditures, and again, this agreement was drafted as Shrek was transitioning into operations, and no one knew exactly how that was all going to shake out in the longer term. I think when we go to the next agreement, which would take effect on July 1 of 2021, issues like that probably need to be fleshed out more. But they would, if the capital improvement is included in the site plan and it's approved by the site council, they would pay their pro rata share of those. What we don't cover in this agreement is what happens if it's a major capital expenditure. And I don't know that we contemplate any of those between now and the end of this next year, which is when the agreement expires. But that's certainly something that I think Tanya Wallace, the CFO, who I see is on the call too, said we need to give some thought to longer term. We were trying to get in place an agreement now so the city could bill for the operational expenses and get reimbursed more quickly, and that's why we approached it this way. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, if they're not, I guess I'm just trying to balance. If they're not responsible financially, I wouldn't want them to be able to hold up a capital improvement that we need to make. I guess I don't have the language in front of me, so I'm just calling that out as an issue. So.
Well, here's Council President. I'll read it to you and I'll forward it to you. And this is what the site council has agreed they will pay. They review and approve the capital budget. Any capital item costing more than $50,000 must be unanimously approved, but any maintenance, operational, or capital construction costs of the CCB that are included in the budget, and it's contemplated that some are included in the budget, they pay their pro rata share. So minor capital expenditures in the budget, they would agree to pay their pro rata share. What the agreement doesn't cover is if you have a major capital expenditure that not everybody approves of, and at that point, we're going to have to work that out. Again, this agreement ends in 9 months or 8.5 months, and definitely if it turns out to be a long-term agreement, that's an issue that we're going to have to cover. But I think in the short term, we've covered it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ormsby. We'll move on to, we have 2 items that Mr. Payne will be speaking on. We have, first is the purchase of police K8s and the police Tahoes are after that. So go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, committee council members. We have 2 purchases here, one for 2 Ford Explorer K8s from Columbia Ford, and one for 2 police Tahoes from Bud Clary, both over on the other side of the state. The funding for these came about because earlier this year, we used behavioral grant money to pay for 2 of the K8s that had already been approved for this year's purchase. They did that so that they could use the money and not lose it. And so the money not used is still left in the SIP loan for this year. The Tahoes are being purchased from a 2018 JAG grant funds and some SIP funds that were left over. Do you have any questions?
Go ahead, Council President.
Yeah, I don't know if it got to you, but I was wondering what the mileage is of each of the vehicles that are being replaced.
Oh, I don't know that as of yet. I haven't been given the information on which vehicles are being replaced. I can tell you that I have 11 Ford Crown Victorias that are setting out back that they have brought in the last 2 weeks. The highest mileage one is 155,000, and then it goes 132, and I think 152 and 132. So I have 11 vehicles out here right now.
And then my other question, so will be great to get that information before we vote on it. And then secondly, what are the potential either hybrid or electric analogs for both the K8s and the Tahoes?
Well, Council President, as you remember, we just purchased and entered into a pilot program. We have 14 hybrid K8s coming. We have 4 of those on site now. We have 2 K9 units and 2 admin vehicles. We want to run that pilot for at least a year before we commit to continuing with the hybrids. We've seen some information come through APWA that's indicating that there are some problems with the hybrid K8s at this point. Nothing, only one major issue, one with a transmission, but some minor glitches that we want to make sure we can overcome and that Ford can overcome before we continue down that path. As far as the electric vehicles, we haven't gone down that path yet. We don't have the infrastructure to support it, but we are watching it closely. They do have a Ford Explorer K8 that's fully electric, I think, that we can get for next year. I don't know about the Tahoes. I can get back to you on that.
What we keep saying we don't have the infrastructure for that, but how is that going to change? What has to change to have the infrastructure? I'm assuming it's techs who are trained on how to do maintenance, but I'm not sure.
Not necessarily, sir.
Okay.
The infrastructure primarily consists of where we can plug these things in and charge them. There aren't enough charging facilities or charging stations within the city right now. It's kind of the argument of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, do we invest in the infrastructure knowing that we're going to invest in the electric vehicles down the road? I don't think we're there yet. I think that's the general consensus. We do have 6 stations down here at Fleet that were put in last year by Solid Waste Collections that are minimally being used. I think we have 1 or 2 employees that are using it because they have electric vehicles. And we have a grant pending to expand that to add another 12 stations that Nathan Grower, a project employee, pursued and we were awarded. Those have to be installed by, I think, June of 2022. So we have some infrastructure going, but we don't have it nailed down yet. And I don't know that we're ready to start buying electric vehicles quite yet. That's why we went with the hybrids.
Where would the charging stations need to be for these electric police vehicles?
I guess it would depend on where they're going to deploy them. If they were down at the police station, they would have to be, located there. We don't store any police vehicles here, only for services, so it would have to be where they're deployed.
Okay.
I have a meeting with Major Olson set for Major Olson and Major McNabb, I think, the gentleman that's taking his place as the fleet liaison, on Wednesday, and I can start that discussion point with him.
That'd be great, and we'd love to hear back from you. Thanks so much for all you do.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
And Councilmember Cathcart, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, do you know by chance, maybe this is a better question for SPD, but how many miles are typically put on a police car during a typical shift, and whether one charge of an electric vehicle would be enough?
That's a good question, and it's a difficult, not a difficult. I can tell you roughly how many miles are being put on the Patrol K8s, which are the hot seat cars. We have 2017s right now that have exceeded 100,000 miles. So the day-to-day mileage, I can't tell you. Is there enough of a charge for them to not have to recharge the vehicle in an 8-hour period? At this point, I don't think so. We've looked at it, and we're doing a take-home vehicle analysis for SPD right now for the patrol side of the house, which is the K8s that get the most use. And out of that, we're gathering some good information that will help us understand how an electric vehicle would work in the patrol side. Now, admin side of it, I think there are some vehicles that would definitely fit in the electric world. It's just whether or not we decide the city and the council and SPD decide to pursue that in the near future.
All right, and then just follow up on that last question. Do the all electric K8s, do they accelerate just the same as a hybrid or a standard K8?
Well, everything we're reading on electric powered vehicles, 4-wheel vehicles, they all go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So their acceleration is by far better than, you know, you're going to get out of a conventional or a hybrid. It all comes down to the first question you ask is will a K8 last for 8 hours? And then the question becomes, how long is it going to take to charge? With the DC fast chargers, I think Avista did a presentation not too long ago. DC fast chargers are somewhere in the vicinity of $150,000 to install them. So do you invest in a DC fast charger for $150,000, or do you go with a standard charger, which can take I think up to 4 hours, 5 hours to charge, which are, you know, the cost of those chargers is under $10,000.
Well, if you need 10 officers to recharge in the middle of a shift, would you need 10 of those chargers?
Yes, you would need 10 of those chargers, or you need 10 other vehicles.
Okay.
Well,
thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions on these purchases?
How fast are the
Go ahead.
DC? How fast are the DC chargers?
I believe it's 20 minutes to 40 minutes. They can reach a full charge.
Okay. And assuming
I'll have to verify that.
And assuming the 10 vehicles on the shift aren't charging at the exact same time, they wouldn't all have to be there. You wouldn't have to have 10 for 10 vehicles.
Well, therein lies the problem, because I don't know how many. I can't tell you how many officers are on each shift with a car. I know there's 48 patrol cars, 48 hot seat cars, and they run 3 shifts. So that I can make an assumption that means there are, I'm losing my brain here, 16 vehicles per shift. So you'd have to have 16 DC fast chargers.
Yeah, but my question is, you could stagger the charging, I guess, and have less.
Only if you could adjust the shifts to somehow come in not at the same time.
Yep.
Because right now you have, I'm just making an assumption, I don't know this for a fact. You have 16 vehicles, 16 patrol units that are changing shifts at the same time.
Yep. Lots to work out.
But I can,
Thanks.
Yep, yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you for that info, and we'll look forward to the info that you're going to send back to us. Next, we have, we're hearing from the Water Department. I don't see Scott Simmons on the call, but is there somebody who's going to fill us in for that time?
Yeah, good afternoon, committee. Steve Burns here. I'm filling in for Scott. This briefing is an awareness document for the committee and the council. It's actually directly tied to consent item E, the public utilities property sale to Gonzaga Haven, and then the discussion requests A and B. They're intertwined with those. If you were able to review the document, you'll probably think that it was a little confusing, and that's because there are a lot of moving parts. And this was put together very, very quickly at the last minute to get this in front of the committee as soon as possible, because the purchase and sale agreement of the Triangle property is what it's referred to, which is currently the Water Department's employee parking. The Catholic Charities is closing on that property October 31st, which means that we have to vacate that property, which includes not only the employee parking, but there's also employee offices in a office building that's on the north end of that property. And we need to be off property by the 31st. So the first part of the bullet items in that agenda item cover the associated costs in dollar figures for the interim move to a temporary location located on the Water Department property. What's not really covered on here are the opportunity costs incurred by all the water employees that are taken from current maintenance activities to actually make this happen. And then the second bullet items are the real awareness part, where we've got the preliminary estimate for the construction of the final parking lot, which can't actually begin until the spring. And the cost for that is $2.3 million. And this is brought to your awareness because this is an item that will be showing up for approval through the city council process. But these are all items that were not budgeted for this year or next year. And so as part of all this, trying to piece together what the funding mechanisms look like and how this is all going to play out. So this is what we have to work with right now, and that's the real basics of it. So I guess if you'd like to discuss the inception of all of this and where it's going, that'd be great.
Thank you. I do have a few questions, and then we'll go to Councilmember Cathcart. One, I thought in the agreement we had worked out with Catholic Charities that they would be helping us find the funding for a new parking lot for us. Is that incorrect?
My understanding is that's not my understanding for it. I'll tell you what I know about it. Is that the city got 2 appraisals for the property, and the appraisals came back at $1,062,000, and then the city is partnering with Catholic Charities with a $500,000 loan, or not loan, but funds from the general fund, and Catholic Charities pays the balance after that. And that $1,062,000 is what would be considered revenue to the water department for the sale of the property. And that this is what is on your consent item E for tonight, is the SBO to fund that $500,000 from the general fund for that
Okay.
sale agreement.
Okay, yeah, it was just under my understanding that we agreed to work with them as long as they helped us find a solution for the parking. So I guess this is kind of out of the blue for me. And then my second question is Councilmember Cathcart and I met with Cal Tuig about the possibility of moving his offices from the edge of where the new middle school is going to go to onto your property. And he thought maybe there would be room for the employees at that location. Is that still a part of the plan, or?
Yeah, that's still a part of the plan. In fact, that's what that SIP loan item that Michelle was presenting earlier was for, from the 1.2 million now to 1.5 million for that elevator. That's for probably over 10,000 square foot of remodel, which is, this is really a very last minute, organizational effort for us to actually get all this together and figure out all the moving parts. So, we're putting this together as much as we can and getting everything recorded, so that we know where all the moving parts are at least. But my understanding is that the SBO tonight is for the $500,000 from general fund to essentially donate that half of that purchase and sale agreement to Catholic Charities, so that they then have the property, and it closes on October 31st. And then, and so in the interim, we've got to move off the property, and we've got temporary space for those employees that you're referring to. Another hitch in the giddy up, not a part of my presentation, but code enforcement personnel are also located in that building, and they're being affected. And I'm not sure what their negotiations are right now with Catholic Charities, but I understand that I think that I believe they're talking with them about something about that building as well. But for the purposes of this, I need to present to you, make sure that you're aware that we have this $2.3 million construction project that will be incurring in the spring for the final parking lot to be constructed on the water department property.
Okay, thank you. I feel like we've had we've known this for a while, so yeah, just kind of seems like it's coming out of the blue. But go ahead, Councilmember Cathcart.
Thank you. So will the dollars for this be coming out of the general fund or out of our utility enterprise fund?
Do you mean for the purchase of the property with Catholic Charities?
For the $2.3 million?
Well, that's a good question. I believe the way that it's set up right now, that it would be out of the enterprise funds, whether that would be ICM, 6-year capital. Obviously, it's at a dollar amount that it would be beyond our maintenance budget at the water department. And that's why this is being brought up as kind of an awareness briefing of trying to figure that out, where the funding will need to come from, and then what will, in effect, what will be impacted as a result of that coming down the line.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm feeling a little odd here, where we're going to give away $500,000 and we don't know even how we're going to find the dollars to do this construction. So that seems a little strange to me. But I guess my follow-up would be, what is it about this parking lot that's going to cost $2.3 million? I mean, it just seems like a pretty big number for a parking lot.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, it's preliminary cost estimates. The original intent was to have the sale, that $1,062,000 sale of the property, and have that cover the construction and the construction of the parking lot and relocation of the employees. That was the original intent. And so the actual line items for the parking lot construction, we have that document. We have the preliminary cost estimates for the grading and the paving and the stormwater management, the swales, the trees, the electrical, and the actual, parking planning, retaining walls. All these things add up, of course, and then with contingencies placed on top. So the preliminary number has a sticker shock to it. But I guarantee it will be more than $1 million.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit like a Taj Mahal of a parking lot. And then the $800K for the workspace. As Councilmember Burke asked, whether we're going to be kind of cohabitating some of these different departments together, and you said that is what's going to happen. So what's the difference between that $1.5 million for that construction versus the $800,000 budgeted here?
Yeah, well, and you'll have to talk with Kyle about that. I haven't been involved in that side. Kyle and Scott have been working on that side of it, because the majority of the employees to that space, which was formerly occupied by Fleet Services at the water department, it's a large garage space that they're going to build in. The majority of them are from the field office, so the inspectors and field engineers for engineering services, construction management. And then there'll be 4 water department engineering technicians that will be sharing that space, as well as file storage, which it does end up being a large space for file storage. So as far as the 1.5 million, going from 1.2 to 1.5, that's because they need an elevator. The reason they need an elevator is because it's above the square footage of remodel that now triggers ADA compliance. So as soon as, and I think it was 2,000 square feet was if you go anything above 2,000, you have to comply with ADA. And so the costs escalate very quickly at that point. But you have to talk with Kyle and Scott about that one.
Okay, we'll do. And last question, I guess, is when will we know what the, more realistic cost is going to be, and when do we have to approve these expenditures?
Yeah, I would guess I'm really hoping in 6 weeks we'll have a final bid package with the refined bid tabs in it, so that we'll actually have the true engineer's estimate. That's why I'm calling it a preliminary estimate, because we're not even to the point of an engineer's estimate, just because of the short notice of the entire project. We didn't know whether or not Catholic Charities was going to move forward with the purchase of the property until a couple of months ago. And so we're kind of hamstrung by that timeline to get a plan out. So we're hoping in 6 weeks we actually have that, because to get this out to bid by January or February, so that when the batch plants open again in spring, we could actually start construction.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
How come you didn't know until a few months ago that they were going to buy this? I mean, I feel like we voted on it a really long time ago, and everything was set to go forward.
Yeah. So the purchase and sale agreement was created. The sale agreement was created a year ago. What was included with it was a feasibility study for the actual use of the property by Catholic Charities. And they had, and Catholic Charities had a time frame until June 30th of 2020 to complete that feasibility study and then complete the agreement to satisfy the agreement of, yes, we will purchase it. They extended that feasibility study period to July 31st. And then once their feasibility study was completed and they decided that, yes, we do want to purchase the property, that's when the sale actually gets triggered.
Okay. I feel like we've known about this for a long time though. I mean, so I feel like we should have been planning a little bit ahead of time. Council President, did you have a comment? It looked like you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I just had one thing just to clarify, that the agreement that we made was that the water department would get the fair market value of the unimproved parking lot that they were giving up, and they are getting that the fair market value of that. So they are getting that because the property wasn't worth as much, and I think it's a bit of a surprise to us that the parking lot is going to cost a new parking lot as much. But I just wanted people to know that the water department didn't have to absorb any subsidy on the actual cost of the land. So.
Okay, well, we are way over time on this one. Are there any other questions or comments here? Okay, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming in and sharing with us. We'll go ahead and move along. We have standing discussion items that are, our first one is with Fire and Police for a quarterly overtime update. Do you want to go ahead, Brian? Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. So let me get that out of the way. The purple line is 2020. We are at approximately about 3.1 million. Our budget is 3.089, so of course we're over. The biggest driver of that still is the protests and demonstrations at 679,000 about. The second is duty-related overtime. Third is shift coverage, and fourth is major crimes SVU. We have had a lot of major crimes this year. We're at 19 homicides versus 4 at the same time last year. So we do have a lot of people working overtime on those kinds of cases. Is there any questions I can answer? We will be over for the end of the year, and we do probably predict there will be more protest activity around the election. Not a lot we can do about that. We just have to show up.
Council President?
Yeah, I had a question, Jennifer. I had a question. The finance office gave us an analysis of police overtime pay to date, and it looked like the majority of it, or at least the most from any one category, was from specialty pay. And my question is, if someone gets called out on specialty pay, say for SWAT service, do they then just go back to their normal shift, or do you give them their next normal shift off?
Depending if they can't, I mean, if whatever staffing, whatever team they're on, if they can take time off, they will get it, but otherwise they do have to come in.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Jennifer? I'm not seeing any hands. So we will thank you for coming and move on to Brian.
Ours is a little bit more straight facing and estimated based on end of year projections. So the bottom line at the literally bottom line is almost $2 million over what we're anticipating our current budget. The majority of that overage is related to COVID and our personnel being the primary healthcare providers for the city, as well as wildland fires and the normal sick that are oftentimes related also to COVID of a family member or somebody that that they're helping or an immediate family member. So not the rosiest of pictures in our world, but we're doing what we can to reduce it. Any action, however, that we make, because we are so tight this year and we don't have any flexibility with spending, would result in a loss of a company or what they would call, or what you hear referred to as brownouts or station closures. If we're not able to make up that difference, that's where we would be looking to for savings. I don't think we're there yet. We're going to continue to do everything we can to stay within our global budget, but I certainly want to make sure everybody has the information on what our situation is.
Councilmember Kinnear.
Thanks, Brian. So 2 questions. One, the wildland fires, are those within our jurisdiction, or are those fires that we will get reimbursed for? That's the first one. The second one is, are the COVID-related expenses reimbursable from CARES money or any other money that we will have coming in to the city?
The quick answer is yes and no. On the first part with the wildland fire, we did have wildland fires here in Spokane that caused a pretty significant impact to our unplanned overtime, much like the police department and those unplanned events that they have. Remember too that when it's mutual aid in county or adjacent, those fires are absorbed by our own budget. When it's out of county, oftentimes those are reimbursed. So we will be coming, like we have in years past, for an SPO to recover those dollars that impact our overtime and that we've paid out to make the employees whole, but obviously we'll be getting reimbursed from the agency having the fire. That is in the total there. You could see the, what is that, line 28 on my screen for wildland fire revenue coming back to us should be about $400,000. We just sent another person out to California, and there may be possibilities for us to send people in units to California. We're wearing those requests through the state right now. So that number could change, but we're already factoring it into the bottom line. Same thing with COVID. We have access to some COVID funding, and that's line 24, which you approved for the COVID FEMA money that came in from a grant that we received. That will help offset, as well as a number of other areas that will help offset our costs. And then we'll continue to take advantage of opportunities as they come up. But still, with all of those predictions for revenue, some realized already and some not, we're still facing about a 1.8 shortfall for overtime.
Councilmember Wilkerson.
Chief Schaefer, so when we send crews out to other areas, does that leave us potentially short for services in our own city?
I'm really so glad you asked that, because most of the other council members have heard me explain this, and I take that for granted fairly often. So the agreement that we have with our federal partners and our state partners is that the city never pays anything for mobilization. So when we send Brian Schaefer out to Tonasket, for example, well, that's not a good one. We'll call him Firefighter Smith. When we send Firefighter Smith to Tonasket, the fire pays for Firefighter Smith, his or her total cost of compensation, and then they also pay for the replacement in that seat for Firefighter Smith, total cost of compensation. So the city's never at a loss for on-duty staffing, and they're never at a loss for overtime that someone would take for going to a fire. That's the only way that we would ever participate. If it would ever come at a cost to the city, we would likely come back to the legislature or yourselves and say, you know, the rules have changed, and we need to decide as a policy whether or not the city continues to participate. But as it is right now, we're not out a penny, and the benefit that it brings to the fire department obviously is it gives our people more experience operating in larger environments with different fuel models and makes them better when they come back to Spokane as a firefighter here. And then, quite frankly, what we saw this year is we had 2 state mobilization fires here in Spokane. So we definitely received some reciprocity from the organizations that we've helped in the past here in Spokane.
Thank you, Brian. We're a little bit over time, but is there any other follow-up questions for Brian here? Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'll move on. We've got a couple items that Paul and Josie's going to share with us. So why don't you go ahead and start with item 2, Paul?
Thank you, and good afternoon, council members. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so the first report that you see should be your intra-fund budget transfers. So these are the items that were budgeted for one purpose but are transferred to a different type or different purpose within any fund throughout the city. You can see most of them are just standard progressive promotions, downgraded for hiring, those types of movements. But if there are any questions on any of the other ones on here, we'd be happy to follow up. Okay.
Not seeing any questions there, so you can go ahead and move on.
Okay. The second report that you received, these are the changes that would increase or decrease the general fund, and it's through September 30th, 2020. These are generally the SBOs that impact the general fund departments. There are 3 that were added in September. We have the police transfer back to traffic calming for $500,000. And then the other 2 from September that posted were the city CARES dollars that we had SBOs for back then. Any questions on this report? Okay.
Not seeing any.
We'll move to our one-pager front and back general fund financial summary for September 30th through September 30th, 2020. And this is a report we update monthly, and we highlight the things that have changed from the prior month. The only change on the revenue side is we are now showing the additional $3.3 million that the city is eligible to receive from the state for COVID relief funding. So that brings our total up to approximately $9.9 million. And on the expense side, the 2 highlights you see below, the first one just updates for those SBO changes, for the approved budget changes with a typo over there, and then also updated for to match the COVID City Cares grant money up top. So we updated the expense line there, the $7.3 million. And on the second page of the reverse side of the one-pager, this is just updated every month for the sales, property, and utility tax revenue we receive in the general fund. And we have the 2-month lag on sales tax, so this stops as of July, but you can see slightly better in July compared to what we were expecting. The middle chart tracks the salary, wages, and benefits for the general fund expenditures, slightly below for most of the months until September, where it catches up to approximately what we thought we would spend in the budget. And the third one is just a reserve accounts, which shows the target to actuals for our revenue stabilization, contingency reserve, and unappropriated. Any questions on this one?
Council President?
Yes. Paul, thanks. Paul, thanks. I had a question earlier, and Tanya said, I think you would answer it today, which is, what were we expecting for revenues in 2020 when we set the budget last December? And I'm wondering what we project that they will end up being.
So I'll cover that in the next PowerPoint I have. It's a couple slides, but it'll show the
Go ahead.
Yeah, the updated amount.
Okay, great.
Projecting.
Thanks.
Awesome. Any comments or questions on this segment? Okay, great. We'll move on to your next presentation, Paul.
Okay. This one pager, this is our general fund reserve report that Tanya puts together. I think this is also sent out ahead of time. If there's any questions, we're happy to take those now as well.
Not seeing any, I don't think.
Okay, I'll switch over to sharing the PowerPoint, which hopefully will answer some of the questions. Okay, so this combines some of our other additional monthly reports, general fund report, revenue expenditures, and touches on uniform overtime, which you just heard about. Some of the 2020 general fund revenue projections that Council President just asked about, which is updated through September. And then a couple quick budget updates on the capital improvement program, the 2021 proposed budget, and some of the impacts from the I-976 court case. So the monthly general fund report revenues, and these are adjusted for the COVID expenditures and revenues that came in. So we try to remove the impact from the grant dollars and the cost containment reserves to give, we think, a more accurate picture of what the general fund's looking like right now. So general fund revenues are still down across the board. They're about 10% year to date, or $7.6 million below where we expected. Local retail sales tax is almost 9% below budget. Property tax continues to lag. It's about 2% below budget year to date. Utility taxes, both private and public, are about 5.4% below budget. So overall, compared to last year at this time, we have about $4 million less in actuals than current year. On the expenditure side, we were also below budget through September, about 3%, which is about $4.5 million. And again, we tried to control for the COVID cost containment. Salaries and benefits, about $1 million below budget. As you just heard, uniform overtime through September, police and fire had spent about 93% and 135% of their respective annual overtime budgets. Quick look, or a different look at the revenue through September.
Well, I think Council President's got a question real quick.
If you go back to that other screen, I'm still trying to get to the bottom of my question, which is, so any pass-through dollars of CARES that went to some other community, I get why we would keep that out, but how much money did we get in revenue that's not shown here that we used to pay our own internal expenses?
I think that SBO that you recently passed, I think it was about $3 million for city expenses.
Okay, so
that included a little bit of the FEMA and a little bit of the CARES dollars.
Okay, so and I know we kept our costs below what we expected. So if you added the $3 million that actually came to the city for operations, what would be we'd be down 4.6 for the year projected?
For that revenue, that matched up entirely to expenditures for that SBO.
No, I know, but our expenditures are down by 4.5 million. So we kept our expenditures down.
But those $3 million were already spent as well. So the revenue and expense would cancel out for the CARES dollar.
Oh, so you said you removed those expenses as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll let you go on. I'm not sure if I track exactly, but.
Just to show it graphically for the revenue, and you can see by month, this one goes through September, still a little bit below where we expected to be, about 10% year to date, 3.3% down from fiscal 19. The interesting thing I think we pointed out last month is that with our 2-month sales tax activity lag, through July, taxable sales are down 1.7% compared to prior year, but retail trade is up 5% compared to 19. The biggest hit is obviously going to be your accommodation and food services industry. Their taxable sales are down approximately 25% compared to fiscal 19. And now these are the updated projections. It's sort of our estimate about what we're seeing revenues being for 2020. So the first column there is your adopted budget. This is the $207.1 million that was adopted for general fund revenue last December. The column next to it, 2020 projected. This is based on our estimates of reviewing the actuals for every month and seeing, putting the art and the science together to try to figure out how general fund revenue is going to look for 2020. And that third column, the fourth column all the way to the right, is the difference between the two. Overall, I think that initially we're showing about $8.5 million difference between the budget and actuals. You can see on here it's about $8.1 million, but there's two or three assumptions made that I think the 8.5 million less is probably more accurate. We're assuming we're receiving all the property tax dollars that we budgeted. We're assuming we receive all the charges for services, and those are our internal service charges to non-general fund departments, the engineering revenue we bring in from working on projects, any revenue that police department would receive. It was tracking higher than budget for the first couple of months of the year, but we didn't think that was going to be entirely accurate through the whole year, so we reduced that to the budget amount, basically, for charges for services. And a similar explanation for the other category, which it's about 2% of the overall adopted budget. We just figured there's enough variables in there, we'll just leave that at the budgeted amount. So somewhere between 8 million to 8.5 million, we think, less in revenue for 2020. And this, again, takes out any of the impact of the CARES dollars or FEMA reimbursements. Does that?
Any questions, Council President? Did you have any follow-up? No. Okay.
So I'll switch over to a couple quick process updates for the 2021 budget and the capital improvement program. So on October 14th, we held the Plan Commission held a hearing on the 2021 through 2026 CIP capital improvement program. They issued their findings of fact, conclusions, and recommendations, which is the certification that the CIP is in full compliance with the existing comprehensive plan and recommends adoption by the City Council. So the next steps for the CIP, I believe next week, October 26th, City Council is set to set the capital hearing date for the CIP. November 2nd would be the first reading of the 21 through 26 CIP ordinance. And then ideally, November 9th, City Council hearing and adoption of the CIP ordinance.
I have a question.
Mr. President, go ahead.
Yep, going back to the CIP, is there a date specific that we have to have that passed by?
I don't believe so. I'd have to double check.
Okay. And then secondly, we still have a bit of a challenge. The items that the City Council asked be added to the transportation section of that weren't added, at least in my opinion, adequately to this one. And I know the Planning Commission's already reviewed it, so I'm wondering, in terms of trying to add it yet again, how do you want that to happen? Do you want us to do a resolution and then you all put it in, or do you want us to do some kind of very formal amendment to it, line by line? How do you suggest us making the adjustments that we already passed in June to this before final approval?
Yeah, we can work on it on our side and get back to you about the best way to get those incorporated.
Okay. You can work with Brian McClatchy on that. Thanks.
Great.
I'm not seeing anything else, so if you want to continue.
Okay. Some process and scheduling for the 2021 proposed budget. The week of October 5th, the mayor's preliminary budget was delivered. Throughout October, as you've noticed, we're reviewing with City Council during the Thursday study sessions. This Thursday is going to focus on the finance and administration aspects of the proposed budget, or the preliminary budget at that point. October 26th, we're going to have the revenue hearing, which is going to review the property tax levy proposals for 2021. And also at the November 9th City Council meeting, we're hoping for adoption of the property tax levy for 2021. November 2nd through December 6th, budget hearings are tentatively scheduled. I believe that also takes a council action, with the last possible date for the budget hearing being 25 days before the beginning of the next fiscal year, which is December 6th this year. And then November 2nd, delivery of the mayor's proposed budget. And then we'll quickly move to what we're seeing as the budget impact as far as the Transportation Benefit District fees, the I-976 court case. Just a quick background, Initiative 976 passed back in November 2019, lowered many state vehicle registration fees to $30. It was almost immediately challenged in court. DOL continued to collect and remit the fees while the lawsuit worked its way through the court system. The city's 2020 adopted budget appropriated $2.8 million in those fees, but in a reserve line pending resolution of the lawsuit. So the money for 2020 is in there, but currently not accessible until we found out what would happen. Last week, October 15th, Washington State Supreme Court struck down the initiative, and the city has $3.6 million in prior year and 2020 revenue, plus an estimated $3.2 million for 2021 revenue to be programmed in the 2021 proposed budget. I think the only change you would see between mayor's preliminary and mayor's proposed would be fully allocating those dollars instead of having some in reserve and some of the revenue held as well. And I think that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, council? Okay. Well, thank you so much for that thorough update. Well, are we good to move on? Okay. Just making sure you got everything, Paul, because you had 3 items, so I want to make sure. Next on our item, we have 2 by Jake. I think he was on here. Okay, there you are. Yeah, go ahead for item number 6.
Excellent. Thank you. I am going to share my screen. I have 2 reports to go over with you. Can you see that okay?
Yes. Yes, we can.
I just put together a PowerPoint based off the long report that is in the agenda packet. Just to go through it page by page and highlight the most relevant information. But on that first page there, it shows the actual contingency reserve balance and the revenue stabilization account at $21 million and $7.3 million respectively. Those have only moved just a little bit by interest earnings, so that's 10% of the budgeted operating expenditures, or 3.5% of revenues, plus those investment earnings. So on page 2, few things there would be the summary of cash and investments. You can see as of September 30th, the total balance of the portfolio was at $422 million. That's about a $33 million decrease from the prior quarter. And of course, as Paul had mentioned, we are about under 10% in general fund revenues for the year. So that's playing into that decrease in the balance. But a lot of stuff that we expected are in there as well, such as increased spending on the library and the park bonds, as well as spending on the next level treatment plan. A few other things, we had a $20 million maturity in August that would have decreased the fixed income portion of the portfolio and went into cash. And of course, we refinanced our public safety loans, which are now yielding 0.76 to the portfolio, which is good on the debt side, but for the portfolio, it's not as good as it was before, because they were recently earning about 2.95%. But also just to say that it's net zero for the city overall. And then we recently issued the Chaz Dental Clinic loans. Also on page 2, the unrealized gain amount, the $11.3 million. It's down a little bit from the previous quarter, but this is just due to the inverse relationship between the market value of the portfolio compared to its cost basis. And this number is really only relevant just to show what the market is right now, but it is our policy and in the best interest as a practice to hold all the fixed income to maturity. So the yield to maturity, which is what I look at as the anticipated rate on the bonds, if held to maturity right now is at 1.23%. That is down from the previous quarter, and we're going to see that continue to go down as the interest rate environment is not improving. It's not really, the interest rates, they don't plan on hiking those for a couple of years now as it looks right now. The 1.33% is what we actually earned for the previous quarter, so that's actual versus anticipated. The composition of the portfolio, so looking at the summary, kind of at a lower level than the previous table, you can see some of the reasons that the rate is going down. About 27% of our money is in the LGIP, which is now, as of September 30th, was earning 0.21% and is now below that. But that has been going down by about 5 basis points with every month. And a lot of those funds in there are anticipated to be spent down in the next year or two by the library and park bonds. So it has been difficult to invest those, and especially with the kind of rates that we would be able to get at the moment. Investment aging is just a chart showing when we anticipate these funds coming in. And lastly, the benchmark comparison, you can see coming on the right there as of September 30th, the yield at 1.23%, down from the previous quarter of 1.34, compared to a 3-year treasury right now, which is only yielding 0.16%. We are outperforming that, which has been fairly easy to do since the market is just not doing so well. But we are also within in the range of other entities, such as the county and cities in Washington and California. They're all within about 1 to 1.5% at the moment. So to summarize that, we're currently outperforming our benchmark, but we do need cash for operating capital purposes. The weighted average maturity of the portfolio is just now under 2 years, but as cash becomes available, we are looking to lengthen that weighted average maturity as we can while waiting for interest rates to start popping up. So are there any questions on that?
I don't think I'm seeing anything.
Thank you. And then I have one last report, which will be another recurring report, but as it relates to SIP loans, it's just a short 2-pager that is show the current listing of what's in the SIP loan portfolio at the moment. The first 12 or 13 are our first refinance of the year at an interest rate of 0.81. The next 6 are public safety, the refinance of 0.76. Then the Chas Clinic, and then our consolidated local improvement districts. So that altogether is about 42 million in SIP loans issued. So now what that leads us to is capacity. And I think that's what this report is mostly here to present. SIP loan capacity in our policy is 15% of the investment balance. So you can see the 421.8 million, which you might recognize from the previous investment report, is that investment balance. However, we have removed bond proceeds from this calculation because these are on a much shorter life due to be spent down in the near term, much shorter than the 5 years that we generally try to do SIP loans. And on top of that, there are covenants in place with bonds that restrict how those funds are used. So we have removed them from this calculation, and the net of that would be 346 million. 15% of that would be 51.9. So that is our total capacity. What we have issued right now is 42. leaving a 12.15 our capacity with our net capacity of just under 3% at 2.85. And below that, we have some pending additions. Most of these have been committed. We've recently discussed today about the engineering construction management relocation loan that has gone up to about $1.5 million. That is the percentages here, the 0.35 and the 1.12 are essentially a portion of that that capacity that you saw on the chart above that. Are there any questions about that?
Council President?
Yeah, just if, I don't think you have, but can you send us this report? Because this will be very critical in us thinking about the public safety one coming towards us and any other, since we're bumping up beyond our capacity, it looks like. So.
Absolutely, and it is in the packet, but I will send that in an email to council.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else have questions or comments on this? Okay, well, thank you, Jake. And it looks like that has come to the end of our agenda. So our next Finance and Administration meeting will be held on Monday, November 16th at 1:15. So we'll see you then. We're adjourned. Thanks.
Good job.